He's going to have a salt and pepper mustache. And his shell is going to be a little greener.
Dexter is the old kind of ornery cook in the back of the diner. I think he was an ex-bounty hunter, so it added a little grit to it. And I thought a four-armed cook thing would be cool, just because it's a cook in a diner and having four arms would be awesome. So I just put four arms on it. It was very free and open. Doug was just like, give him another body option. You know, so we just did real quick, tiny ones. You know, the bust was like maybe that big, and then I did two full bodies this big. And one of them was the kind of layout of Dexter, how he turned out. He had that big kind of a glottal thing here. And I always loved Simang monkeys. And they, you know, they're super funny. They brachiate all around and make that hoot, you know, but before that hoot, they kind of go woo and blow this thing up, and then they woo, 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 you know, and this thing keeps moving. And I just have always loved those, so I was like, I'm going to get one of those into one of the characters. And then it made the cut, and in the show, if you watch them, you know, the way they made that into a real breathing thing, like while he's talking, it kind of sinks in, and then he breathes, and then while he's talking, it sinks in again. It's really cool.
You see funny little cuts on the side that give it away. Those analysis droids only focus on symbols.
It was cool to see a voice connected to him, and I loved his voice. That voice made the character really come to life.
Oh, buddy!
His head is slightly over.
But you put yours back up.
I put mine back up like that. So he's going to look a little bit taller when you compare the two. Okay.
You know, his hands were super big, and that was a big change. You were like, whoa. And the costuming had kind of been added. I kind of sculpted him naked with a little just cook bib, like a little apron. In the concept phase, you just do your version, and what it ends up as, you're just kind of like, whoa, that's cool.
Depends on what, Dex?
On how good your manners are. How big your pocketbook is.
We first see Zam Wesell's speeder in the chase on Coruscant, where Obi-Wan and Anakin are trying to find out who's been killing people. When I was first given the designs for what became Zam Wesell's speeder, again, we didn't have the script yet. It was early on in the production of Episode II, and that particular speeder was intended for the Caminos. In fact, there was a piece of artwork that showed a Camino kind of with his head tucked down low and forward to try and fit into the speeder, which didn't really seem to work, I think, for him, and probably just as well that they didn't end up using them. But it was interesting that it got repurposed for another character later on. Originally, you couldn't get inside the model. I carved it from a wooden block, and then they came back to it and said, oh, we have an interior we want to put into it. So I had a design for an interior that I had to then fit inside of this model. So I had to cut the model open and figure out how to put an interior inside of it.
I mean, what you could do is round this off.
Okay, running off this way.
Run off that way, and then make this window continue all the way up to this, so it's like one bubble.
I think the look was nice because it had a certain amount of menace to it, I think, that worked for her character. Because at that point of the film, you didn't know whether it was a man or a woman or some sort of other alien. And so to have the ships or look like the character's persona, I think really helps in the film.
Younglings! Younglings! A visitor we have.
Hello, Master Obi-Wan.
We made lots of we had little baby Jedis in episode 2, which were really sweet, just tiny little Jedi outfits and little Jedi boots. And we had little helmets made for them so that they could be seen, the scene where they're all learning to use the Force, so their eyes are covered.
So it goes like that and then it goes back.
Okay, so, all right, let's put it on. And I go helmet back. You show me what you're going to do. Helmet back. Yes, good.
There's only 2 variations, though. They haven't sort of developed their own individuality yet, so there are 2 styles of baby Jedi costumes. Sort of not quite girls and boys, so we intermix them a bit, but one's sort of a longish jacket with sort of a skirt-shaped thing, and then if you're a girl, or some of the girls have trousers on too, and then there's a shorter version. So simple.
Truly wonderful the mind of a child is.
Zam is a female bounty hunter that we see quite near the beginning of the film.
I hit the ship, but they used a decoy.
We'll have to try something more subtle this time, Sam.
We sort of went through various sort of different types of fabric ideas, and we ended up with sort of leather.
I mean, these are the only leather colours they have, so you have to choose.
So the whole range is done.
Yes.
In that.
Yes.
And the colour was something that developed quite late on, the sort of lavendery, lilac-y colour. Once the costume had sort of been established, we were sort of already working. The costume props department were already working on making the shapes and doing moulds and prototypes for George to look at before we actually finalised. It was quite a last-minute decision to use such a strong colour. The skirt's sort of based slightly on sort of a Japanese warrior type, Japanese-Chinese sort of mixed. So it was a similar sort of feel where we cut out small squares of leather and punched holes and then overlapped them and linked them through with a leather thonging. And the squares were all then hand-dyed. We hand-dyed them before we linked them together. So they all have a slightly different colour. It's quite a nice effect, so you sort of get rippling. It takes quite a long time to dress her because all the pieces are sort of separate. So she has trousers and then boots with armoured pieces on them, and everything has to go on in a certain order. I would say it probably takes at least half an hour to get her dressed.
You know what might help sell that, him getting hurt, is if instead of falling off the side, he falls off the front and the shack tramples him.
The shack is it's very funny looking, big, fat, pig-like or tapir-like creature with a big round body and lives on Naboo in the lake country. And we see a bunch of them out in the field when Anakin and Padmé are picnicking, and it's kind of a funny, playful, romantic scene, and Anakin is kind of challenged to ride one.
Yeah, I would let him get kicked a little bit from the point where he gets kicked.
This shack was a maquette that I did sculpt from just two-dimensional drawings. This one was not very well fleshed out, as I recall. I had a few drawings of this fat, bulbous animal that, I mean, it looks pretty much like the one you see in the movie, but honestly, as simple as he looks, this just big, fat thing, it really was quite a difficult character to bring to life because anatomically he's pretty outrageous. Got this big body that's kind of like a flea engorged with blood or something, and a head kind of like a tapir, and these 4 little tiny legs. And I believe I struggled for quite a while just playing with the shapes and getting the proportions of the legs right in conjunction with the body and just making it look and feel right. And when you're kind of fighting what is intuitively good anatomy to something that's really alien anatomy, it can sometimes be a struggle because you don't feel like it can work somehow, but you have to make it look like it can. When I saw it on screen and actually moving and looking like, well, yeah, I could buy this as some kind of alien animal, I was pleased to see it. Because honestly, when I was sculpting it, I thought, this is too ridiculous to make any sense. But it did work on screen. It is a funny looking animal, but it does work.
I want to get an idea from you.
No, I think that's good.
What you wanted to do.
He kind of does that. He kind of just sort of walks around. He looks down at R2.
For episode 1, C-3PO was a puppet. It was done in the Bunraku style, Japanese puppeteering, where the puppet is actually suspended in front of the puppeteer, and through a series of linkages to the body, mimics how that person moves.
Master Anakin, you are my maker, and I wish you well. However...
On episode 2, we were meant to use the puppet once again, and initially there was some concern that whether or not Tony could do it physically because of his stature, so I was going to puppeteer it, but Tony asked if he can try it, and so we let him try it with the rig that we had. And I was also, the idea of having to wear that thing in the desert didn't appeal to me, so I was like more than happy to let Tony wear it. It was amazing to watch Tony puppeteer it, because even though it was heavy and even though it wasn't him in the costume, all of a sudden the puppet looked more like C-3PO than anybody else could have done. And then he puppeteered it for the film, which ultimately was cut out and replaced. Those scenes were replaced with him in the suit.
I am C-3PO, human-cyborg relations.
And then the suit was actually, for episode 2, was actually an Empire Strikes Back suit that we just painted, simply painted.
Oh, my. Hello. It's so nice to be back.
And that was, again, one of those quick rush jobs where we were told, I think, on Friday what it was supposed to look like, and it had to be on set on Monday.
116 Charlie, take 1. Mark. Set. Set. And action.
There.
Not quite.
Sorry. Still rolling.
So in episode 2, we made the Tusken family, and the Tusken women is actually one of my favorite costumes because it is so beautiful and the detail is just exquisite on it. It's unfortunate that we really didn't get to see them in the films, but it was also another one of those groupings of characters that Trish really needed to stay true to who they are because you see them in Tatooine on episode 4. So the textures of the fabric were quite the same, and the wrappings of the hands were the same, and the little slits that they see through were very small, even though the Tusken Raiders have those little beady eye things. It was the woman has this beautiful mask that was handmade by the costume props department. It was really hard for the actor to wear. You could only wear it for 10 or 15 minutes at a time because it was hard to breathe in there and you couldn't really see anything. You had no peripheral vision at all. It was just kind of, you had to kind of do this to really be able to see what was going on. It just, it's a very, very tight-fitting mask.
Hi there.
Hello.
How you doing in there?
Good.
What's it like in there?
Fun.
It's fun in there?
Yep.
The Tusken Child is another one that was brand new to the family. We'd never seen anything like it, and the hood of it is the beginnings of a baby doll stroller. Then we tried, I think we had like 4 or 5 different strollers. We're like, that one's too thick. This one, was too wide here, and Trish really wanted a really rounded sort of thing. So we tried all different kinds of things. So that was sort of the base of it. And then we kind of reworked it to make it, fit over a child's head. And then we put the distressed fabric over it. And then, the rest of the costume was the distressed, sort of brownish toned costumes that we all know that of the Raider families are.
Ready and action. Go, Tim. Look.
So in episode 2, we made the Tusken family, and the Tusken women is actually one of my favorite costumes because it is so beautiful and the detail is just exquisite on it. It's unfortunate that we really didn't get to see them in the films, but it was also another one of those groupings of characters that Trish really needed to stay true to who they are because you see them in Tatooine on episode 4. So the textures of the fabric were quite the same, and the wrappings of the hands were the same, and the little slits that they see through were very small, even though the Tusken Raiders have those little beady eye things. The woman has this beautiful mask that was handmade by the costume props department. It was really hard for the actor to wear. You could only wear it for 10 or 15 minutes at a time because it was hard to breathe in there and you couldn't really see anything. You had no peripheral vision at all. It was just you had to do this to really be able to see what was going on. It just, it's a very, very tight-fitting mask.
Hi there.
Hello.
How you doing in there?
Good.
What's it like in there?
Fun.
It's fun in there?
Yep.
The Tusken Child is another one that was brand new to the family. We'd never seen anything like it, and the hood of it is the beginnings of a baby doll stroller. Then we tried, I think we had like 4 or 5 different strollers. We're like, that one's too thick. This one, was too wide here, and Trish really wanted a really rounded sort of thing. So we tried all different kinds of things. So that was sort of the base of it. And then we kind of reworked it to make it, fit over a child's head. And then we put the distressed fabric over it. And then, the rest of the costume was the distressed, sort of brownish toned costumes that we all know that of the Raider families are.
Ready and action. Go, Tim. Look.
Designing the characters for Geonosis was really interesting. I mean, it's, prior to this, when I was working on episode 1, we did a whole bunch of character designs, and there's, various ideas that were kind of put aside for later. And George responded to one of them.
Yes, very good. There was good heads and things of various kinds of characters in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Geonosians were, I think the general term was sort of the termite people. So they were kind of subterranean, and it was imagined that they had built up these stalactite architectural structures the way termites build their mounds.
And so we went and started really thinking, okay, well, if this is kind of a society that lives on this very dry planet, and they live underground, and they're kind of insect-like, what could they look like? What could they be?
I like the more dragonfly-ish wings, the more transparent.
Okay. We gave them the classic, insect profile. We gave them hard body armor to protect themselves from the harsh element. We gave them wings so they could fly. And all these little pieces of elements that we started to pull from our research started to piece together to create the ideal look for the Geonosians.
They have these kind of articulated, almost grasshopper-like mouth plates and things like that. So it's sort of define that, the way the eye sockets might work, and kind of this gritty texture they had on their bodies overall, this kind of armored exoskeleton. Once George was sort of happy with that, he said, okay, now let's make soldiers, and let's make the leader, Poggle, the leader, has a very different sort of look.
If you could do that, and you could do something here, whether...
Something that comes off the shoulders more?
Yeah, well, you could like tie some ropes and tie some feathers or something down there, maybe, just hang.
And it was trying to sort of mix the human element of an advanced society, but they're insects essentially, and how do those two, how can you mush those together?
Yo! That's cool. What is that, John?
It's the Acklay.
With the Acklay itself, it was just one of those characters that I was really honored to be able to work on because it was just different. It was different. It has a cross between, like an insect type, kind of like a reptile. Has all these little details on the back is kind of furry. It looked like one of those characters that was really just very original because it had all these different elements to it, and the detail was like trying to put different animals or different insects and put them all meshed into one character.
He's got little irons on the end of his elbows. See how dangerous he is? He got me there, and it's just a model.
By the time I got into the CG form, they did do some changes of the color, and I think they put an eyeball right here in the middle. So that's the things that, it's kind of interesting. You hope they don't change it that much, but when they do, you're like, okay, I hope it's all for the good, and you see it, and it still looked like the Acklay, except it just had an eye in the front of the face, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, interesting. Well, at least it's still one of those characters that I could be, proud to be a part of.
So you see this big rhinoceros coming to attack you, and then this is also coming.
It's bigger than this.
Yeah, it's real tall. A man fits under here. It's taller than a person by a long shot. But it's got, and its mouth will be open and it'll be slavering teeth, and it'll be skittering down the thing toward you.
The Nexu was one of 3 creatures in this Geonosian gladiatorial arena. The Nexu sort of fill the role, if you're looking back at the Roman gladiatorial arenas, of a lion or a tiger. And the trick, as far as I was concerned, was to not make it too literal. Originally, George was actually talking about it being albino, which is why this guy has pink eyes. We always try to show some variations, so these are from albino to kind of brownish to a spotted albino, and then finally to a striped version. And it was the striped one that George ended up liking in the end, and that's the version we see in the film. It always helps to know what a creature is going to do, and George said this is going to be the creature that climbs up a pillar after Padme.
And then another close-up of her, and then she turns and looks, and then it's her point of view as this other, the cat creature sort of comes up over the pole toward her.
Again, always looking, to nature and things that function in the natural world. Was looking at arboreal creatures, so things that like sloths that climb, and there are these sloths that have these big claws, and then it's a predator, so it's got this huge mouth with huge teeth like prehistoric salamanders, and vipers, and multiple eyes like spiders. So it's kind of taking things from vicious creatures in nature and putting them together in a way that looks like it works and would make sense, and there's almost some evolution behind it. I did, just to try to reinforce how it might move, I would do a piece like this that shows just a basic diagram of how the basic skeletal structure would move as the creature is going through a walk cycle or a run cycle, and then just 2 variations while it's walking, how this thing moves much more like a lizard than a lion. Part of the challenge was making something that size and with those proportions actually move like a lizard. And I know that in the end, the animators I think they did sort of a hybrid where it couldn't exactly be one or the other just because of the way it was shaped. When I was sculpting it, I was imagining it moving very close to the ground and something that in its native habitat would climb trees and things with the way its claws were.
With the reek, it was specifically a dinosaur one, and at one point George brought in a little piece of reference of this specific dinosaur. It had that shape of that kind of heavy, kind of bison front with the pointy back, and he was like, make it something like this. And then Ian had done a drawing of a bull with these 2 big giant kind of toenails, but it's in this U, like a horseshoe. And George liked those, I think. He's like, let's use those feet. And then it was given to me, like, do something, in sculpture form. And I did a quick little tiny maquette that looked just like the reek as it ended up being. And it was that shape of that dinosaur. And then I just redesigned the head to have those 3 horns, kind of more towards the way the reek ended up. And then we added battle damage. I think George was like, yeah, get some more damage on it, because he's a this arena character that's slamming into cement and stuff. Specifically with the head, it was trying to make another interesting character, and like all the little bits that are all kind of leading to the eyes. Like I'm always, when I'm designing a face, even if it's a creature, raw creature, I want to have some character in it, so I'll try to design things that almost point at the eyes, because the eyes are usually or where character sits. Even the flow of the color to get brighter right at the eyes. And that was a nice death. This huge creature that you would think would take forever to die, and he just kind of just like, boom, and he's down. That was kind of good.
P11 is a tight-fitting action costume. It was meant to be a costume that you could move in quite easily and be quite sort of able to do battling and fighting and running.
Padmé! Put the ship down!
But also a costume that she was going to look young and active, and George sort of liked the idea of a light-coloured costume because we were going to see her in the desert, and then against the red earth that we're going to be using for Geonosis. Just was sort of quite an interesting image. Well, she has tight-fitting trousers and a very tight-fitting top and knee-high boots with leather shin guards down the boots, metal armbands, and a belt with a holster for her weapon and various pouches, some of which concealed the radio mic battery pack, and things like that. So, I mean, there's always those things you always have to take into account too, the problems if you need to use a radio mic on somebody with a very, very tight costume where you can hide it. So the packs come in, the little pouches come in quite handy.
The shape is the same as the other one. So,
Well, I think we should do some digital pictures and let
yeah.
George see them.
Yeah.
And then just decide whether we feel we want to slim that down. I know he was very keen to keep a lot of things exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, well, with Jango Fett, George wanted a definite link between the Jango Fett armour and the Boba Fett armour. Originally, the idea was that there would be an assumption that Boba Fett, when he grows up and becomes a bounty hunter, is actually wearing his father's armour. Originally, the Jango Fett costume was going to be white as a link through to the clone troopers. In a way, we made the link more to Boba Fett with the colour of using a blue leather for the armour and keeping it blues and greys, because that's more the colours that Boba Fett wears later on. With Jango Fett's helmet shape, we had to ensure that when he was fighting that we couldn't see up inside of the helmet, and it to be comfortable but safe. So if he's fighting, there's nothing hard that's going to sort of hit on his neck. Those were quite difficult things just to work through, and that was a real combination between the people who were actually making the soft part of the costume and the costume props department, sort of working out fixings that would work inside the helmet and also things that would let the actor have sort of ease to take it on and put it off. Most costumes are not made to be saturated with water, so we just made lots of them. We made 3 for the actor and 4 for the stuntman. So we had enough that if they got wet, and he had a wetsuit on, or we had a wetsuit for him if he wanted to wear a wetsuit underneath so the water wouldn't soak through.
The super battle droid first makes its appearance on Geonosis, and we see them in the great arena battle. Doug Chang told me that the super battle droid was supposed to be the battle droid's big brother. And so we wanted to kind of make him look like this big, bulky football player type, with his head kind of tucked down into his shoulders to be protected, and these massive shoulders and arms, and big guns on his arms, and just supposed to be a little more imposing than the skinny little battle droid. Something else that Doug really kind of was pushing on the designs on those was elements of blades. If you look at some of the forearm, it has this sort of blade-like edge on the forearm. After I'd worked up at the ranch on the pre-production, then I went down and worked at ILM for doing the models for the actual shooting miniatures. And Russell Paul, who was leading up the CG department, called me over and he said, "I got something you might want to see. We have a walk cycle for the Super Battle Droid." And so he brought me over and he was showing me the CG walk cycle of this robot. And he showed me the side view and it looked really, really cool. I was like, wow, that's great. Then he showed me the front view and we realized we had to redesign his crotch area because it looked like he had a big something hanging between his legs.
Give me a stop for a second. Yeah. I don't know when this is painted. Go forward. Well, this little appendage looks unfortunate.
Hadn't noticed that, yes.
Well, when you paint it, did you make sure it gets painted down?
Well, there's geometry. So. The top of frame there on the old animatic was, second tier up, and that there's a lot more that's up above that. So if you want to get that top lip in, it means pulling
way back.
Way back.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Okay, we don't have to do that.
The arena sequence in episode 2 was a fun one for me. The arena itself was logistically complicated in that it's meant to be a very large space. It's a very densely populated space where not only do we have the architecture that has to be depicted, the whole virtual environment, but it has to be populated with thousands, many thousands of characters that all have to have kind of individual and plausible behaviors. So crowds were integral to doing all that work. Something you want to do when you're depicting crowds is just put detail where you need it. So there are a handful of shots where you can see the whole sweep of the stadium with foreground characters that are the full res, and some way back we're switching to the medium res, and then off in the distance those are the very low resolution ones. Those are still pretty dense scenes, but we couldn't have used the full res ones all the way around. It's not with the technology of the time. Another big challenge of the arena was just how many shots there were, and because of the complex, organic, sculpted architecture of the arena, we elected to build a miniature for it. So the miniature, I think, was 16 feet across, and it was all sculpted out of foam. In order to get all the backgrounds that we needed, we split it up and then shot it with 3 separate crews. The whole thing was divided up into 45-degree pie wedge sections so that we could split the model apart and have one crew that was shooting with one section of the model for all the angles in this direction, and then another crew shot simultaneously all the angles in that direction. And we had a night crew that came on to shoot additional angles.
Watch your head there.
It's nice.
So it was a logistics problem to kind of group all the shots together that needed different sections of models so that they could all be shot together. But by swapping out the different pieces, we were able to get all the different angles we needed.
So the Republic gunships, which are featured in, you see them in the arena when the stormtroopers show up, they're riding in those. Yoda's riding in one, and they wind up chasing Count Dooku with one of these. Doug Chiang had done some sketches. The sketches to me look like Apocalypse Now. These things look like attack helicopters. And again, did a small model that was about 6 inches long and showed that to Doug and George and got a buy-off on that. And from that moved to this larger scale model. And this was a fairly detailed model. It was the only model, I think, for episode 2 of a vehicle that we actually got full paint and everything worked on it. The doors actually function. And it was interesting playing with the doors because I remember the snow speeders in Empire and how they had these flaps on them that acted as speed brake, air brake type things. And so I built the doors on this so they could open, but they could also do that whole thing. They could open up like brakes. And we talked about it back and forth when we were doing it, and at one point George said yes, and then he wasn't sure.
Yeah, let's do it without doors.
Okay. So
let's assume the doors sort of go up into there.
Okay.
And it also had cargo in the back, and George said put something back there, so I made little speeder bikes. I made 4 speeder bikes that are on racks back there, just to kind of pull from the original Star Wars back into these films. I'll show you the doors.
And you put in some speeder bikes.
I remember the meeting he came in to look at the model. I had them in there, and I had the thing pointed at George, and he kept looking at it, and I kept turning it so that he would keep seeing this. You know, I kept wanting him to say something about the speeder bikes. He never did, but that was what was in the back of it. And then George also made a kind of a late modification to it. He wanted to add the clear turrets that are embedded in the wings, and there are 2 turrets that are on either side that can kind of pop out. They're sort of like miniature Death Stars. They have a little emitter on the front of them. There's a guy in each one of them. Pretty cool.
it might be nice that when we cut in to this group and we give them weapons, these guys march in, and then right before they turn, they do a maneuver. You know, like with their guns, they indicate the big guns, and they go chung chung, and then they stop and turn. So they're like getting into position.
Mike Murnane did the sculpt of the clone troopers. He had a lot of models of stormtroopers and stuff, and Boba Fett, to try and take elements from those and make sure that they were included in there so that it had the same sort of feel, like it was from the same universe.
Short for a stormtrooper. 6 feet, or he should be 6 feet.
One of the details that was a last-minute thing was every Friday we have meetings with George to go over the designs, and he would give a feedback on what he thought, what he liked, what he didn't like, and tell us, you know, the development of the story, because it was constantly evolving as we were working on things. And we realized, oh no, Mike's got the model done, the meeting's this afternoon, but we don't have a gun for it. Okay, quick, let's just throw one together. So I went through the model kits that Mike Murnane had lying around. They were all different scales of stormtrooper guns and things. And so I took a regular old stormtrooper rifle, cut the handle off it, turned it upside down, stuck it on the end of a stormtrooper long rifle, and we just sort of painted it black, stuck it in the model's hands, and put it out for the meeting, intending to go back and create something new and more interesting. And that never ended up happening. And that ended up in the film that way. So if you look at the clone trooper rifle, it's actually an old stormtrooper rifle in the wrong scale, flipped upside down, with another handle on the back.
Magnificent, aren't they?